Hello, Truth Seeker, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Learn True Health podcast. I have two pieces of news for you before you jump into today's episode. And oh boy, this is such a good interview. I'm really excited for you to hear what Martha has to share about her journey in all of the research she's done with thousands of stool samples. I know that doesn't sound amazing, but it is amazing because she was seeking the root cause of helping her husband reverse and heal his Parkinson's disease. And what she uncovered was amazing. And I'm just really, really excited for you to dig into today's interview. First, something I've been working on for months now. It's in fact close to 9 months that I've been pouring myself into this project. Back in January and last few months, I have dropped some hints about this project. For the last 20 years, I have been working with clients to help them to turn off their anxiety and to rewire their brains so anxiety is not a problem for them anymore. I've had clients who are in almost this constant state of panic attacks, who cannot fly because of their fear of flying, who have massive phobias, who can't even leave the house, to other clients who they function day to day, but the inner turmoil, the inner drag and stress of having to just live with anxiety, either on a constant basis or specific anxiety when it comes to work projects or social situations or dealing with their elderly parents. The anxiety, whether it's constant or whether it's occasional, for most people, it's a total drag. It's exhausting. It's all consuming. It disrupts sleep. It disrupts our energy pathways. It disrupts our body's ability to heal itself. It takes us out of that healing mode, puts us in a state or actually it is stress. I shouldn't say anxiety causes stress, but even thinking about having anxiety can give someone stress. So if you know someone who suffers from anxiety, I want to let you know that you can share this with them. And if you're someone who suffers with anxiety, or if you have a loved one or family member, I have some really good news for you. And that is that over the last 20 years, I've been fine-tuning these techniques that very rapidly help someone to turn off their anxiety. And then by practicing, there's 7 tools that they practice that's easy to practice every day. It rewires their brain, and that within as little as 30 days, they can have a significant reduction, if not a complete elimination of anxiety as a constant problem in their life. And over time, the more they practice these tools, the more they gain control, the more they have peace, and freedom, and joy and ease in their life. But what's really cool is the first tool I teach turns off anxiety within 90 seconds. And so no matter how bad your anxiety is, whether you're, like I said, in a panic attack, like a 10 out of 10 anxiety, or a small, just nagging anxiety, we can turn it off. We can turn it off within minutes. Sometimes it's 15 seconds, but this technique, I say an average of 90 seconds, because usually when I first teach it to someone, that's about how long it takes. But once you get good at the technique, it's 10 to 15 seconds of doing the technique, and your body will get completely out of anxiety, back to zero, back to being at peace and calm. So I teach these tools. And I've done these tools with large groups. I've taught individually. I've worked with individual clients for the last 20 years. Over the last 8 or 9 months, I have been making a course so that anyone can learn these tools. And what I did was I recorded clients. They, of course, gave permission. I recorded them learning the 7 tools and put that together in a course. And so you can follow the journey of people with totally different types of anxiety. You follow them along their journey, along their healing of overcoming their anxiety by implementing the tools that I teach them. And then I also recorded lessons where I break it down and I teach it step by step. It is easy to learn. It is not complicated. It's a complex and beautiful when you understand it fully, but it's not overwhelming or complicated to learn. It is straightforward and it works. I actually haven't found someone that this didn't work for, which is really exciting. because it works. This is how the brain works at creating anxiety. And so we reverse engineer it. And it is getting to the root cause and supporting you in stopping anxiety in its tracks and reversing it, rewiring the brain so that your body has excitement and joy and you have mental clarity and you have full access to your prefrontal cortex instead of feeling muddled and stressed out. So if you'd like to check this out, I give the first tool for free. You can go to my website, learntruehealth.com, and in the very top it says got anxiety. Just click on that. And from there it asks for your name and your email. And then I share the first tool. And I want everyone to have the first tool because that gives you immediate power to stop anxiety in its tracks. So the first tool is different from the other 6 tools. There's, like I said, 7 tools in total. The first tool is about turning anxiety off in the moment. And how amazing is that for people who struggle with it, who feel like they're a victim of it, right? So if you can turn it off in the moment, that gives you so much freedom and so much power. And then the other 6 tools are homework you do on a daily basis. It's very easy to implement. It's very quick. And what it does is it rewires the brain so it doesn't go to anxiety in the first place, doesn't create it in the first place. So all 7 tools together are really powerful. And this is my course that I am launching to the world. So you can check it out. Just go to learntruehealth.com. And like I said, in the menu, click on the little banner I made that says got anxiety and follow along. And you'll get the first tool for free. And if you want to check out the course, you can purchase it. There's an option to do payment plan if you'd like. It's not expensive. I wanted to make it affordable for everyone. In fact, it is less expensive than working with me for one session. So if you were to hire me one-on-one, it's less than that. But I want to make it accessible to everyone. It works great for teenagers. It even works for, as long as the kids can follow instructions. It works great for kids. Actually, kids do it faster than adults. They've got, I guess, less baggage. But it works for anyone who can follow directions. So share it, buy it and share it with your husband, with your kid. Do it as a family together. These are tools you can all practice together if you're a family that knows you have anxiety. Some people don't know they have anxiety, but they're always worrying, right? If you're someone who's always worrying or always waiting for the other shoe to drop or always thinking about a negative outcome that could happen, and you have problems with stress, so maybe hormone issues, digestion issues, sleep issues, the root cause may be in your thinking because we have a mind-body connection, and just how we think can impact our physical health. And I get into explaining that and the science behind it in the course. So letting you know that it's launched. It's called Anxiety Freedom, and I am very excited to bring it to the world. So go check it out and get the first lesson for free. LearnTrueHealth.com. Banner at the top says got anxiety. Just go ahead and click on that and follow along. Now, today's interview, Martha, who's absolutely amazing, has developed a product based on all of her research, and she's giving us 15% off. So after listening to this interview, if you wanted to try it for yourself and see how it goes for you, she has different targeted probiotics based on what you're dealing with and what your health goals are. So she's giving us 15% off. The coupon code is LTH, as in Learn True Health. So coupon code LTH. And the link to what she does is going to be in the show notes of today's podcast at learntruehealth.com. And wherever you're listening from, whether it's Spotify or whether it's the Apple Podcast app, if you click on the notes or the description of this episode, you'll see the link there. Go ahead and check it out. And then, like I said, if you're going to order from her, make sure you get the 15% off coupon, which is LTH, as in Learn True Health. I started taking her probiotics after we did this interview. I was so inspired to. I bought the entire line, and I'm sharing it with my son and my husband. And the one for the calm brain, the focused brain, I noticed. Now, it's too early to tell, but, my son, we homeschool, so I'm with him a lot. He has ADHD, and we try different things to help with focus. And I noticed that math, when he took the supplement, when he took the probiotic, that math has become easier to do, and we complete the work in a shorter period of time. So I'm hopefully optimistic and still looking for more results. My husband noticed that his sleep improved, his bowel movements got even better, which he was like, "Oh, this is really interesting." And we've only been taking them for a few days. Um, and I've definitely felt more in control of making better choices. Like I I I'm a health nut. I make great health choices, but sometimes it's, late at night and you're like, chocolate sounds really good or whatever, right? Like everyone's got that little like food noise, I would say, to a certain extent. And what I noticed after starting these supplements is that the food noise went way down, and that it's even easier to make better choices and not like make dopamine choices, if that makes sense. So I thought that was really interesting. But I'm still watching and observing. So I'm really enjoying the supplements, and I'd say that already, just after a few days of taking them, we have noticed changes, which is really cool. So enjoy today's interview. Remember, always try to use the coupon code LTH, because every guest I have on, if they sell something and I believe in the product, it has to be something I believe in, that I've done the research and I see that it's good. It would be helpful for myself, for others, for you. And then also that they stand behind their product and they have a money back guarantee, because I just don't trust companies that don't stand 100% behind their product, right? So she does, of course, have that. She has a guarantee, and is giving us 15% off. So coupon code LTH. Enjoy today's interview. Welcome to the Learn True Health podcast. I'm your host, Ashley James. This is episode 568. I am so excited for today's guest. We have with us Martha Carlin on the show. She's written 2 incredible books, Connected, Love, Loss, and the Unseen Forces Behind Chronic Disease, and My Search for the Perfect Poop. Now, you are an amazing scientist, and one of the things that you're really passionate about is our microbiome, which, I think everyone at this point has heard of a probiotic and has this understanding, this basic understanding that there's can be good bacteria inside us. That is part of our health. You take it so much deeper and show that there's connections to chronic disease, to I've seen it connected to mental health and mental emotional health. I've seen it, impact metabolism, right? The study where they switched out the microbiome of obese people and thin people, and basically fat people with a thin person's microbiome lose weight. It's just wild. It seems like this is the key to health, not another drug, right? This is the key. If we can put a certain microbiome in someone and they heal and they get healthier, it seems that this is definitely the key, that we should be going down this rabbit hole. And we're going to do that today with Martha Carlin. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Ashley.
Yeah, absolutely. First, discovered you around your information about Parkinson's, which my mentor, Dr. Joel Wallach, he saw long ago, because he's a naturopathic physician, he's also a large animal vet, and he's a pathologist. And he saw under the microscope that chronic diseases of the nervous system, like Lou Gehrig's disease, Parkinson's, and MS, all look relatively the same, but in different locations. And he saw that when we changed diet, increasing antioxidants, getting more, whole foods, antioxidant-rich foods, getting healthy fats, that he saw that there was a reversal, that people could go into remission, especially like MS, they could go into remission. But he saw that we could largely impact these things when we shifted using nutrients as medicine, right? and then taking it deeper and going, well, what if there were a microbiome that could be medicine as well? And so I'm just so excited to dive down into this today. But I definitely want to start by hearing your story. What made you want to go down this road of researching what's in poop and how can it help us?
My journey actually started back in 2002. I was 40 years old, had a great career in business operations and was kind of clocking along, and my husband was 44, and he was diagnosed with Parkinson's. And on the outside, he looked healthy. He was a marathon running athlete his whole life. It just didn't make any sense to me at all that a young person could have an old person's disease. And
Hmm.
because I had this background in business operations, I had been trained as an auditor right out of school, which when you're trained as an auditor, it's like never take anything at face value, examine the evidence for yourself. And I was also taught this process of called transaction flow review, which is how you evaluate a business for risk, and you draw these flow charts of everything that's going through the business. And so I looked at Parkinson's and said, well, I think that's the same kind of problem. I'm an expert at this. Why can't I do this for Parkinson's too? And so I started laying out and mapping Parkinson's. And of course, food and water are the two main things flowing through the body. So I first just started looking at the food and threw out all the processed food in our cabinet back
Love
in
it.
2002 and started looking for organic food because my husband had been drinking soy protein shakes every day for 2 years before he was diagnosed. And, I'm not saying that's the cause, but I think it was a contributing factor because at that time, soy had become about 97% genetically modified and, widely sprayed with the herbicide glyphosate, which is an antibiotic to the microbiome. Now, back then, I hadn't heard the term microbiome. So fast forward 12 years into the diagnosis, I read a book called Missing Microbes by Dr. Martin Blazer, and he was talking about the microbiome, the trillions of bacteria, fungi, viruses, protists that live in and on our body, and the fact that they are kind of like an internal pharmacy. And we're losing that in the generation that has grown up with overuse of antibiotics, which came into place, roughly in the 1940s and 50s. And I also knew that my husband and many people I had talked to with Parkinson's had early childhood history of either ear infections or strep infections, lots of antibiotics, or using antibiotics for acne in their teens. And so I was very interested in the microbiome. 6 months later, they published the first paper that showed they could divide the two types of Parkinson's by different bacteria. And I was like, whoa, this is it. That's the general ledger of the body. It's keeping track. And I quit my job and started funding research at the University of Chicago. And 6 months later, started a company to collect people's poop in a box and build out a biobank to help scientists and help myself start to understand the microbiome more. And so we were collecting samples from people across the population, but obviously I had a keen interest in Parkinson's. And so then I kind of became affectionately known by my family as the poop queen. And then along the way there, then started seeing in the genetic data in the microbiome that we were looking at that there were whole functional groups that were missing, and came up with the idea that we could put teams together and put them back into the gut. And so that's sort of my 20 some odd year journey.
So when looking at people with different diseases, were there similarities popping out? Like, oh, everyone with Parkinson's is missing these strains, or has these strains that a quote unquote healthy population doesn't? Was it obvious when you looked at it?
So it was well, I say so. There are now 2,500 or more papers on Parkinson's and the microbiome, and they show different things. So there's a group in Finland that has showed one strain of bacteria that they believe is highly correlated with Parkinson's, and that's a organism called Desulfovibrio, and it produces hydrogen sulfide. So that is an area that we have looked at. Also, H. pylori. There's a connection with H. pylori, but more so from what we were looking at loss of function, not necessarily specific microbes. But then over the course of time, like I just published a paper with a researcher in Australia, and we looked at pathogenic bacteria in particular that produce an enzyme called urease, and that kills the good bacteria and causes a spilling of calcium and potassium into the gut and changes the pH and uh, electrical signaling and all kinds of different things. But there are there are patterns in Parkinson's that are very similar in autism. So changes in the carbon cycle, changes in sulfur metabolism, and all of these tie back to the microbial populations that are there. But some of them also tie back to exposures, so environmental exposures, whether that's things like herbicides in food or heavy metals or air pollution. And there's a brain first, body first aspect to Parkinson's where they talk about when you're breathing in the initiation of the disease actually starting through the nasal passage, which is very close to the brain, versus those that start in the gut and may come through the mouth. So it's very interesting because we also have a nasal microbiome.
Oh, right, right. And breathing in through the nose helps increase nitric oxide, which we learned in a recent episode. But that makes sense because there's a bacteria in the mouth that we want to protect. It's a good bacteria that helps to make our nitric oxide. And when they looked at a population that uses mouthwash, basically an oral antiseptic, like
Mm-hmm.
Listerine, for example, they have a significantly higher rates of heart disease. And that's because they're killing, not non-discriminately killing all the bacteria in their mouth, including the good bacteria that makes nitric oxide, which nitric oxide helps protect our cardiovascular system. And so by using an antiseptic or antibiotic, basically, you're wiping out the good with the bad. Problem is, a lot of times the bad bacteria or the unwanted cultures can grow back faster, and then have a stronghold and create a microbiome and take over in the body. And then they're producing, like you said, they produce things that are not good for us, that break us down instead of build us up. I had some interviews with Viome. Have you heard of that company?
Oh, yes. Yeah, I
Yeah.
know their chief scientific officer very well.
Yeah, so I had them on the show and talking about how it's a at home test, and I did it, and we had two episodes, one before my test, one after, and they send it easy kit to do. You put your little thing of poop in a box, basically, send it back to them, and in a vial, and it's very easy, not messy at all. Um, and they're testing the genetics, the genetic expressions of your own microbiome. And there's super fascinating things that I learned about mine. For example, I don't have a problem with oxalates because I have a specific strain that breaks them down. So, because I was eating copious amounts of spinach and kale and not having any problems, whereas other people would have kidney stones, my microbiome loves them, eats them up, and I don't have a problem with it. But I had a strain that when I ate eggs would create a inflammatory compound for my heart, and I started to get heart skips. And I could turn my heart skips on and off based on whether I was eating eggs or not. And that was in my microbiome. It showed up in my test. And so then I stopped eating eggs and they went away. I added eggs back, they came back. And it was just really interesting how it can be that specific, but we can look at what the microbiome makes, what it produces, right? There's the prebiotic, right? There's
Yep.
the prebiotic, which is the thing that feeds your microbiome. there's the microbiome itself, which is the probiotic, and then there's the postbiotic, which is what you're talking about. This is what it basically the nutrients or either the harmful or the helpful compounds that it poops out essentially that our body absorbs. And the fact that it can change its environment, like you mentioned, it can change the pH, right? It can change the environment to suit itself, which then it would create a hostile environment to your good microbiome if it was that specific strain. And that's fascinating because then it looks more like a complex war going on between these different factions, these different, you know, living organizations inside of you.
Well, I have sometimes thought about it as a war, and I think we even did in our paper talk about the battle in the gut, but I actually like to think about it more as a vital community.
Mm,
And if we have a healthy, cohesive community, we don't have crime. We don't have, everybody's living well together. Neighbors are helping each other. Uh, I mean, our society isn't much like that as it used to be 100 years ago, and neither is our gut, but that's really the ideal. And that's also the way when we started making probiotics, we built them as teams that would work together,
mm-hmm.
where what one was producing and spitting out, another would use. And if it was a compound that was less desirable, then we would have another team member in the formula that is picking that up and using it to produce something more beneficial. And I think what we've seen with the overuse of antibiotics and food preservatives and emulsifiers and all these dietary exposures we get is that disruption of the healthy, cohesive community.
So yeah, you mentioned that you did end up creating specific probiotics, and I definitely want to talk about that. Your the collections that you have for specific things, like you have one for sleep. Um, really interested in learning about the science behind these, and you have one for heart health and immune function, sugar metabolism, and for stress and for immune. I don't know if I said immune, but
Yeah.
yeah, uh, I've been interested in this for years. This idea of utilizing specific bacteria or healthy bacteria to inoculate your gut so that you can end up having a more diverse microbiome. Because as we know, that is the healthier people. And maybe we can talk more about your research and how you've seen this in your collection of stool samples that the more diverse, likely the healthier the person can be. Um, that we have, I had a guest once say we in America we have the Homer Simpson of gut microbiomes because it's lacking the diversity that we once had. And I've had this great experience with Dr. William Davis's Lactobacillus rhodori. You probably know that he's been on that
Oh,
bandwagon for about 10 years.
I love
Um,
him.
yeah, right. Well, I've had him on the show multiple times. He originally, I had him on the show about 10 years ago because I was such a big fan of Wheat Belly. I had gone gluten free back in 2011. And in the first month of going gluten free, so avoiding barley, wheat, rye, and I also avoid oats. They're not gluten, but I avoid them for a similar compound to gluten. And in the first month, my husband and I lost so much water weight. I went from looking like Ernie to looking like Bert, like my face just like shrunk. And and I lost both of our wedding rings, which we had custom fit, would fly off of our hands. And I lost about 25 pounds of water weight in that first month. And we ended up having to have our rings resized. And I went down, I think it was 1.5 ring sizes. He went down 2 ring sizes just from avoiding barley, wheat, rye, and oats. And that can shift your microbiome because what are you going to eat instead, right? So I was eating different starches, different whole food starches like brown rice and potatoes and sweet potatoes. But that was where I first learned about Dr. William Davis, and then I had him back on the show when he wanted to talk about Lactobacillus rhodori. at that time, I was in deep depression, having lost my daughter. My father in law was dying. My husband moved out to go take care of his dad. So I was kind of grieving alone with our son, and I homeschool our son. So I was just alone with our son all day, really depressed, kind of, which was normal. It's normal to be
Yeah.
depressed if you have
Yeah.
lost a child, right? And there's so much family drama, and we had to quickly move out of our house. It was just like all of this stuff was happening at once, and I was really, that was, I think, the most depressed I'd ever felt in my life. And I had this interview with him, which was great. And I said, okay, I'm going to try this. So I immediately get all the things I need to get, and I make it, and I drink it. I consumed the lactobacillus rhodori, the fermented,
Mhm.
version. And that day, well, I think it was the first time I had smiled in months, like 3 months. And I felt something shift. And within 3 days of drinking or eating it every day, uh, I noticed that I was just lifted out of it. I mean, I was still processing. I was still having emotions, but I wasn't in this dark despair anymore. And that's the only thing I changed. And I'm like, holy crap, that's like one strain. That's like one strain of bacteria that my body's missing. And it helped me come out of the depression. I told my friend, I said, I've never been on I've never been on antidepressants, but I feel like I'm on an antidepressant. Like I'm just lifted. I'm elevated. My mood is elevated. I can finally see the light at the end of the tunnel. Like I was just lifted. And that was, like I said, 3 days on a probiotic that is one strain. Can you imagine? And that's one strain we're missing because it's passed down through mother's milk. And if your grandma or great grandma had an antibiotic, it wiped out of her system. Or even your mom had an antibiotic before she breastfed you, it was completely wiped out of her system and then thus not passed on. How many strains? How many strains are we missing that we desperately need? And so I love that this is what your research does. But okay, so what I want to talk about right now is the the compounds the probiotics make that we're supposed to have in our life. They're like nutrients, and if we don't have that strain, we're missing that nutrient. So, in your research, can you enlighten us about these different postbiotics and how important they are for our health?
Sure. So, bacteria or your gut bacteria, one of the things I talk about is it is the primary factory for many of the hormones, neurotransmitters, your vitamins. So B vitamins are produced by gut bacteria. Most people think it's just coming from food, but that's not true. The bacteria in your gut produce B vitamins. They can produce vitamin K. As you experience, they can help elevate the production of oxytocin, which makes us feel better. One of the other connections to when you do feel depressed, it's actually quite well documented that the cell wall component of gram negative bacteria, which, I'll classify those as the bad guys, most of them are the bad guys. Um, those cell walls can they can initiate major depressive symptoms in
Wow.
under a minute by just injecting a small amount of that endotoxin into someone. And Dr. Davis actually did a talk for us at Institute for Functional Medicine last week about metabolic endotoxemia. So the bad bacteria, so it's not just the live bacteria and what they're producing. It can be the cell wall components of both dead and live bacteria, and that's not well understood by people. But the cell wall components would also be considered a postbiotic, so not always just metabolism. But if I just go back to the example of the first formula I made, I actually made it for my husband. We went to the World Parkinson's Congress, and there were researchers there showing in an animal model that the sugar alcohol mannitol could stop the aggregation of the proteins that were known to cause Parkinson's and actually pull them out of the brain of the mouse. And I was like, oh, wow. So I came back from the conference and bought a book on mannitol chemistry and started reading about this amazing molecule that's used a lot in medicine. And it's a free radical scavenger, so it's kind of putting out the fire before you get oxidative damage in tissues. It is an osmoregulator, so it's going to pull that excess water out if you have it, or if you need to hold water, it's going to help hold water. But the first chapter of the book was showing the bacteria that ferment mannitol from glucose and fructose. And I was like, okay, wow, we have way too much glucose and fructose in our diet. Could we put a factory back, a team of microbes that could do this conversion in our gut? And I had a friend who was a fermentation chemist and had been in the probiotics industry for about 20 years, and talked to him and said, what about putting this team together? And he said, let me see what I can do. In 90 days, we had this formula for my husband, John, to try. And at the time, he was walking with a cane and unable to navigate through crowds very well. And within 30 days of starting the probiotic, he was no longer walking with a cane. He was able to navigate the crowd of 5,000 people at our daughter's graduation a few months later, and just a remarkable turnaround. His Parkinson's score, which is a uniform Parkinson's disease rating, went from a 35 to a 20. The higher the score, the more advanced you are. And it stayed at a 20 for 4 years until he had COVID. So not only did he improve, but he was very stable. But what we went on to look at in how the team was working together, it was also producing butyrate, which is an organic acid or short chain fatty acid that feeds the gut lining, the cells of the gut lining. And we decided to do a clinical trial, not in Parkinson's. We did it in diabetes because there were a lot more agreed upon clinical measurements we could look at. But one of the shared things so about 60% of people with Parkinson's also have some level of insulin resistance. So we thought that would be a nice overlap as well. And we decided to measure serum LPS or endotoxin, that cell wall component that I was talking about, because endotoxin is used in animal models of diabetes and Parkinson's. And so we thought, well, if we can lower endotoxin, then we'll have an understanding that it may also be beneficial in Parkinson's and other inflammatory states where LPS endotoxin is part of the underlying factor. And that was one of the most significant changes that we saw. But we also saw a significant shift back to an anaerobic gut. So we were basically reforming the gut terrain to what it should be, which is anaerobic, which allows bacteria like bifidobacteria to flourish, Akkermansia to flourish, and a couple of other species that are keystone species like Roseburia and Faecalibacteria. And we were bringing all of those back, and the pathogens were dropping out. And so we were getting a nice kind of back to that restored ecosystem, but the production of butyrate feeding the lining of the gut was also providing protection so that any endotoxin that was present wasn't crossing over into the bloodstream.
Which of your formulas contains what you first fed your husband?
So that is the sugar shift formula.
Okay. Got it.
And, people with Parkinson's, John always craved sugar. He craved sweets. And I knew many people with Parkinson's craved sugars. And one of the things that we also found with the sugar shift formula is it stops people from craving sugar.
Mm-hmm. In the last 10 years, I've seen several articles. I'm sure more have come out. But I remember two. I remember two scientific papers in the last 10 years that talked about how they proved that microbiome strains hijack the brain, that they're whatever they produce that goes into our body. I can't. What's the technical term for it? What
A
the
metabolite or
yeah,
yeah.
the postbiotic, or I
Mhm.
mean, it could be good or bad, right? So let's say it's one that's not great, that's making you crave sugar. Whatever it produces some kind of neurotoxin that that goes from the gut into the brain. It crosses the blood-brain barrier, and it hijacks the brain and tells the brain, uh, eat more sugar so
Yeah.
that it can be fed what it needs. That your cravings are actually the your current it's a your cravings are a reflection of your current microbiome, because your microbiome is fighting for your attention to feed it more of what it wants. And the yeast, or like the whatever overgrowth, the negative overgrowth, of the kind that you don't want that's happening, it's gonna tell you to crave more of what it feeds it. And I noticed because you can inoculate your gut by changing your diet, right? Eating, like, let's say when I went whole food plant based, within weeks I started craving kale and I'd have these dreams about these delicious crunchy kale and tahini salads, right? It's just so delicious. Whereas before it's like, ew, I just, why? And now it's like I think of it and I'm like, it's so delicious, because my gut microbiome is like, yes, feed me more of that, because it's what it feeds it, right? So your microbiome could be the reason why you have those cravings. And we don't want to feed the Homer Simpson microbiome, because we don't want to be a Homer Simpson. We want to be a Maggie Simpson, or Lisa Simpson, right? We want to be not Maggie. We want to be Lisa Simpson. We want to be the smart one and the healthy one. Um, so my concern, though, is, and maybe you can clarify because you have studied this. I've seen information that when we take a probiotic, um, after we finish taking it, it's good while we're taking it, but that when we're finished taking, we finish that whole bottle of whatever it is. A month later, you could do a poop sample and none of it's there. Like, it didn't actually live in the gut. It didn't grow. It didn't inoculate. And that's my concern with a lot of over-the-counter probiotics, is that you could get some benefit while you're taking it, but it's not actually changing, it's not shifting the terrain. So you have to keep taking it in order to have the effect. Um, have you seen that or heard of that, and how do you combat that?
Well, so I do hear people talk about that a lot. I have, I'll say, a different viewpoint on whether you actually want a probiotic organism to engraft or colonize your gut, because I know the toolkit for engraftment and colonization um, has some genetics that can be passed along to pathogens. So, and I don't like, I think you want these things working as they go through your body and not necessarily colonizing and being there all the time. So I have a different viewpoint about that. Just because I know that genetic material passes from one microbe to another. And if you are engineering strains to engraft, um, that may not necessarily be beneficial. And if you think about it, like, you can take a probiotic. So, say, for example, our sugar shift probiotic. I mean, I don't think people have to take that forever. Our clinical trial looked at 3 and 6 months, and the gut was still remodeling at the 6 month point. But I do believe that once you remodel the gut, if you are feeding it the right kind of food and you are avoiding the toxins that are killing the good bacteria, then you should have a healthier established microbiome yourself. It's just when you are constantly bombarding your gut, whether that's with microplastics or um, herbicides from conventional foods, or eating out all the time, um, then you're probably going to have to do some periodic work either with fermented foods or probiotics or a combination of both. And I'm a huge fan of fermented foods.
Mm-hmm.
We design our formulas kind of like fermented foods, and we even use one of the strains that we use in a number of our formulas is called Leuconostoc, and uh, you don't find it in a lot of probiotics, but it's almost in every fermented food around the world. And recently, there was a paper that came out in Korea showing that a Leuconostoc strain that was isolated out of kimchi could bind and remove microplastics. So
What?
yeah, it was very exciting for
Cool.
us because like we saw the paper and I sent it to my bioinformatics person and I was like, "Can you look at this strain? Can you compare it to our strain? How many genes does our strain have that this strain has?" And so, it was kind of an exciting and fun exercise but that Leuconostoc mesenteroides is kind of the first strain that grows in a ferment like a kimchi or a sauerkraut, and it sets up the terrain and the pH so that those other lactobacillus and bifidobacteria can flourish.
How long? So if the point is not to inoculate the gut, but to help reshape the gut, how long would someone want to take your specific formulas?
So we have one, it's called antibiotic antidote, and that's one that we just recommend people take for a month or two after they've taken antibiotics. So, you want to set the terrain back in place that can have a broader colonization, but we don't recommend that people take that forever. We have another one that is called Ideal Immunity, and that one we recommend that people take with them if they're going on foreign travel or if they've had food poisoning. It's very effective against a lot of the foodborne pathogens. So
Ooh,
that's kind of more of I'll say a spot treatment, if you will, or, we're going to a retreat in Mexico next month and we're taking it and we're taking extra bottles for other people who are on the retreat in case
smart.
anybody, gets the Montezuma's revenge.
Mm-hmm.
But the sugar shift one is a little bit different because, like, I look at it, we've done so much to our gut and kind of destroyed the ecosystem through the Western diet, through antibiotics, through all the food preservatives. And, unless you're going far, far away and you're going to totally cut out all of that stuff, you're probably still getting exposed to it. But either way, you're not going to fix your gut in 1 month. Because it's taken 20, 30, 40 years to get it in the messy shape it's in right now. So that is one where we have looked at it and we see that it is continuing to remodel over time. And so, our clinical trial was for 6 months, and that's sort of what we say is the reset period is about 6 months. And at that 6 month period, we were almost at zero endotoxin. So then I would say, okay, at that point, you've got to be really mindful of what you're eating and putting in your gut. But, maybe you only want to take it periodically because we studied it also for the breakdown of glyphosate, which is the most widely used herbicide in the food supply and is pretty much present. You can't get away. You almost can't get away from it. I won't say you can't entirely get away from it, but you almost can't get away from it. And
Yep.
we studied it in the lab at 1,000 times the allowable limit for a single food ingredient, and it broke down 27% of the glyphosate in 24 hours.
Oh,
So, I just think like it's probably useful to do something like that periodically, um, just to make sure you're kind of cleaning out the system.
wow. What you said cleaning out the system, I thought, are there side effects? I'm thinking, is someone going to take it and all of a sudden have really bad diarrhea or constipation or bloating? Um, are you, obviously it's not harmful. This is helpful, but are there noticeable side effects when taking your probiotics versus any
So,
probiotics?
there can be depending on sort of what kind of toxic burden you have, we
Yes.
will typically tell people to start off low and slow. I mean, I'll have some people I say start with half a capsule because as you start to shift that microbiome, remember we're having a die off of those gram negative bacteria. But as they die off, then you have more of the cell wall debris that you have to deal with that is inflammatory and can cause depression and all these other things. So if you go low and slow, then that process takes a little bit longer, but you have fewer of those side effects or symptoms as you're going through the shift.
This isn't like parasites where if you're taking a parasite cleanser, you don't take enough, like the parasites sort of detect that there's something coming after it and they'll sort of like get ornery and fight back. Like you're not concerned about that.
I'm much less concerned about that, but a lot of bacteria produce what are called bacteriocins, which are very specific targeted molecules against pathogenic organisms. And they don't seem to develop resistance to the bacteriocins. So,
Okay.
a pediococcus would produce something called a pediocin. A plantarum would produce something called a plantaricin. Lactobacillus reuteri produces reuteri. And I love Lactobacillus reuteri. We use that bacteria in, I think, 3 or 4 of our formulas. And it is actually one of the bacteria that can convert fructose into mannitol.
Oh, so cool. I don't know if you know this about me, but after I had my first amazing experience with Lactobacillus reuteri, I started doing experimentation. Dr. William Davis promotes making a yogurt, like a fermented yogurt, using Lactobacillus reuteri, so that you can get the maximum amount of culture in you, like much more than what is sold in these little like chewable Lactobacillus reuteri chewables that he says you start off with. And he uses cow dairy. I have always been allergic to dairy, so I have been experimenting, and I found out after playing with different things, cashew, organic cashew, not just plain raw organic cashew, not roasted. And I've made over 200 batches. I've given it to friends. They've had great experiences with it. I have a family member who was having constant diarrhea so bad that they couldn't leave the house after a course of antibiotics. And within 3 days of taking it, they called me up and they're like, I never want to be without this because their diarrhea went away and they felt amazing. But I published it on my website. So you can just go to learntourhealth.com and type in yogurt, and you'll find my recipe of how to make it. But my question is, can we do the same with your probiotic strains? Can we ferment it like for 36 hours at 100 degrees in a medium like cashew or some kind of milk? And will we get the same
Absolutely.
result? Yeah?
Yeah, so in fact, we ended up with sort of a niche group following that also came from Dr. Davis, that they started making yogurts with our sugar shift. And now we even have that in a powdered culture starter scoop, because there were so many people doing that. And
Yes.
the Luvelli yogurt maker that Dr. Davis talks about sometimes, they sell it as well.
Huh.
I don't know if anybody has made it with cashew, so I want to try your cashew
Yep.
recipe. I have done it with coconut and um,
I just don't like the flavor. I've done it with soy and coconut, did not enjoy the flavor. And then when I did it with cashew, it became the most delicious thing I've ever eaten. And I do put like a potato, like an inulin potato powder in, so it does kind of
mhm.
thicken. And I do add some maple syrup, just a little bit. And I figure that also feeds them, but it makes it taste good
Yeah.
also.
Well, the
And
microbes will eat up most of those
yeah, they eat it
sugars
up. They
anyway.
eat it up.
Yeah,
It's not
yeah.
as sweet like when it's done 36 hours. It's not as sweet as the batch when I first make it. But yeah, you could check it out on my website. The whole recipe's there, and I do it in a specific instant pot. There's a specific type of instant pot where you can manually adjust the temperature.
Mm.
And then I even go in. I still go in with a yogurt thermometer, and dial in, because I have in the past I've had 3 instant pots. I now am down to two, but my 2 instant pots are, even though it'll say like I have it at set to, let's say, 102, it'll be like 98. And I'm like, oh, I gotta actually set it to 106 for it to get to 102. Like, so I've had to play around to understand my instant pot. But yeah, that's my whole thing is there, so you can check that out. But that was my question, because something about the fermentation process helps us inoculate the gut better. And maybe you can explain the science of this.
Well, you're also getting a lot more of the postbiotic metabolites in a
Yes.
longer fermentation like that. And I have this really interesting story. I have a gentleman in Greece who he has his own products that he sells through pharmacies in Greece, and he read about our yogurt on one of Dr. Davis's like customer groups, or I'm not sure how he found out, but he tried to get it, and we couldn't get it shipped to Greece. He got a doctor that he knew in the United Kingdom to bring it to him. So he got 10 bottles of the capsules, and he made enough coconut milk yogurt for 600 people. And he did this little study where he found it didn't matter what was wrong with them, that it made them better. And but he tried all these different yogurt makers and all these different kinds of coconut milk yogurt. And so he has this one green box Malaysian coconut milk, and he ferments it for 48 hours, and then he chills it for 48 hours, and he says it's like creme brulee. And so
Wow.
I have on my list this summer to get the yogurt maker that he's using. I know I can get the coconut milk he's talking about on Amazon, and I'm going to try it myself. But he's working on bringing it to Greece, and to basically make the yogurts in Greece.
Wow, that is so cool. I wonder why he chills it. Is it because we're actually after the postbiotic material more than we want the living bacteria?
Well, so bacteria go through a growth curve and a die off. So, and when you're going these long fermentations, you're going to get multiple cycles of the growth and die off and growth and die off. So at some point, you probably do want to arrest the fermentation process.
Uh,
And, he just found that the 48 hours is ideal. I mean, I do the 36-hour fermentation, but I've had some tricky batches, and I recently learned that I should not start fermentations on a full moon. Have you ever heard that?
oh, okay. Explain why. I love this. This is
Well,
the type of farming, bio
biodynamic.
to get biodynamic
Yeah,
farming. It's so wild, right? We have to remember that everything, we're not somehow like separate from this world, right? Like everything
right.
impacts us. So what the heck is it about a full moon? They have like statistics that like the ERs are more full, like the overnight jail is more full. Like, what is it about a full moon that makes us go crazy? And if it makes us go crazy, like, does it makes everything
Makes
like
the
it kind of,
microbes go
right?
crazy. Well,
Exactly.
I
What?
think they grow too fast, and then you get what I
Oh
was
my
getting. It
gosh.
was a big separation of whey,
Mm.
and it turning to a cheese. I mean, it was a great cheese, but I was making yogurt, so so I started looking around because it happened to me several times, and then I went back and looked at the calendar, and I was like, oh, like I'm doing these in the full moon, and then I found some fermentation experts who said, don't ferment during the full moon, and so we also have four strains of bacteria that are unique to us, that we identified, did all the work to bring them to market, and in the process of that, talking to fermentation manufacturers that grow those at scale for us, and talking to my friend who was the fermentation chemist. I learned that's a very tricky business too, because bacteria are sensitive to weather and, barometric pressure and this and the sun and all these different things, so they can get a different yield of colony forming units
Wow.
every time they grow, a 20-liter tank or however much they're growing. And so, yeah, they're just as different as people are.
Oh, that is so cool. So years ago, probably like 7 years ago, I interviewed Serica Cernhouse. I don't know if you've heard of her.
I don't
It's
think
okay if you
so.
haven't. It's okay if you haven't. I had her on the show twice, but she shared something. This kind of like, I feel like she really sparked my curiosity about going deeper into understanding the microbiome. And she explained that she told her whole story in the interview, so listeners can go check that out. But basically, she was really sickly, and she just couldn't figure out. She was like kind of days in bed. She was trying to go through college, and she was just sick, and she couldn't really get a leg up. And I'm not sure. I can't remember what prompted her to do this, but she started eating fermented food, tiny, tiny bits of fermented food, like a teaspoon at each meal kind of thing, getting a variety of it. And then she built her way up to where, she's eating spoonfuls of it. And she just she just fermented everything she could get her hands on that, was fermentable. And now her microbiome is in the top 99 percentile, and people have offered to pay her thousands of dollars per bowel movement because they want to, you know, study it and use it to inoculate someone or whatever. She said she won't do it. And I'm like, are you kidding me? You're pooping gold. Like,
Yeah.
like you should sell your poop. She's like, that's weird. I'm like, no, it's not. It's money. It's science. But yeah, so she built her whole health up, and then she did this with her family. And she said, in the past, if she had had, let's say, like a beer and a slice of pizza at some barbecue or party or something, she would have woken up the next day wrecked. She would have been just like
Yeah.
grossly hungover, feeling totally out of it for days, just like really like inflammatory foods wreaked havoc on her. And now that she has such a diverse microbiome, I think she's the one that actually coined the Homer Simpson. I think she said that. But that she has such a diverse microbiome. She says she can, once in blue moon, if she's at a party, a pizza party or something, she'll have a slice, and the next day she feels nothing. And that is a testament to health. Health is, how does your body handle insults? How quickly do you bounce back? How little do you feel those insults? And how if you do get sick, how quickly can you recover, right? And so she just found that she hardly gets sick. She feels so good, and she maintains a good diet, but once in a while when she goes off the wagon, doesn't feel it. And she attributes it all to eating a variety of cultured fermented foods. Now, not everyone has the time and the patience to culture a bunch of foods and to eat that. Although I geek out on it, but it does like you have to remember. Right? I have lost some batches because I forgot. Right? You put something because you have to put it in a dark place in the kitchen, and I'm like a month later, I'm
Right.
like, oh no, I forgot about that
Right.
thing. And
Yeah.
so you have to you have to remember, or like remember not to like make it on a full moon. And and that's why I like that you've created something that is proven and simple, and we can do it, especially when someone needs a leg up. They need to start feeling better right away. Um, so I'm excited to tell us a bit about. You said you have two strains that you brought to market specifically. Can you talk a bit about that?
Or it's actually 4 strains. So, the Leuconostoc that I mentioned earlier, so Leuconostoc mesenteroides, the you will find it, it's often used in, cheese manufacture, but it's
Mm,
rarely seen in a probiotic. It is one of the main strains in kimchi and in, sauerkraut, and I believe it's also in kefir.
mm-hmm,
I have to look that up, but, we isolated a strain from sauerkraut from cabbage I had grown in my garden like 7 years earlier, and I had these giant jars of sauerkraut, and we were doing all this testing in the lab and getting environmental samples and fermenting things and also isolating strains out of people's stool samples. And this leuconostoc was just kind of an amazing strain. And it is also one of the mannitol producers. So that's one of the strains. We also have a Lactobacillus plantarum, and that came from fermented elderberries that
Mm.
I collected in my neighborhood. But that strain has turned out to be a really amazing strain because um, it was resistant to glyphosate, and most lactobacillus are not resistant to glyphosate. Most of them are killed by glyphosate. But
That's
it also
wild.
breaks down one of the secondary metabolites of when glyphosate starts to break down naturally. It produces something called AMPA, and that's even more toxic and harder to get rid of. And this particular strain breaks down AMPA. So, that was very exciting for us. And that, I think that might be in every single one of our formulas. The Leuconostoc is in 3 or 4 of the formulas. We have a strain called Pediococcus acetolactici, and that came out of another fermentation. I can't remember off the top of my head what that was, but you will often find Pediococcus in like salami or fermented meats or things like that. It in particular can break down proteins, so it's proteolytic, and that was also why it was interesting to me. Um, and you will sometimes find that you will find a Pediococcus strain in other formulas sometimes, but not very often. And then we have a strain called Lactobacillus ruminus, and that did come from a healthy human sample. And that's a really interesting strain because it produces a number of those bacteriocins we were talking about. It's 100% effective at killing listeria. It's very effective against salmonella and E. coli. E. coli is one of those gram-negative LPS producers. And that's the one that is in the ideal immunity that we recommend for food poisoning or foreign travel, that kind of thing. And it's also in our antibiotic antidote formula. So those are the 4 key strains right now. I am also working with Dr. Tom Dow, that I've been working with him for the last 4 years on a strain of bacteria called Deitsia natrolimonea. It's a mouthful. But he's done a lot of work around that particular strain and its effectiveness against Mycobacterium avium paratuberculosis, which is connected to both colorectal cancer and Crohn's disease and colitis. And it is endemic in the dairy cattle. So
Mm-hmm.
one of the reasons why people are probably having trouble with dairy is that then, their immune systems are not robust enough to kick out that Mycobacterium avium paratuberculosis. For short, we call it MAP. But this Deitsia bacteria is very effective at outcompeting that. So, it knocks it out. And we have 2 clinical trials we'll be doing later this summer on that. And it looks like we'll be bringing it to the market at the end of July or early August.
And listeners can go to biotiquest.com/LTH. That's BIOTIQUEST.com/LTH and use coupon code LTH as in Learn True Health to get their 15% off when they purchase any of the Biotic Quest products. That's so interesting. I was just reading an article about people that consume dairy have an increased chance of colorectal cancer because of that bacteria that is prolific in bovine products. I don't remember the name of the bacteria, but there's a bacteria that attack the beta cells of the pancreas in utero. And they talk about that in the book, Mastering Diabetes. I've had both authors on my show, and one of them has a PhD in understanding insulin resistance, which is the cause of type 2 diabetes, or is type 2 diabetes, is insulin resistance. But both of them are type 1 diabetics. And so they're really interested in, well, why? Why are we type 1 diabetics? Like, what happened to us? And the immune system is tricked into destroying This is their explanation.
B
Destroying its
cells, yeah.
own beta cells in the pancreas because of a bacteria that is commonly found in bovine products. And so, like, for
I
example,
think it
dairy.
it probably is a mycobacteria. It might be MAP or something else because we are also doing a very small study right now, but with 4, I'll say, children or young adults who are still making a tiny bit of insulin, but are classified as type 1 diabetics to see if we can reverse that. And Dr. Dow did some interesting work with type 1 diabetes and the BCG vaccine, which is kind of strange, but that's a tuberculosis vaccine. And for people who are diagnosed within, the first 6 months of diagnosis, they can sometimes reverse that with a BCG vaccine. But, that has risks itself, which
Right.
didn't warrant trying to use it in the smaller children. But I've also talked to a number of people who developed type 1 diabetes after a very powerful dose of antibiotics. So then that made me wonder, what did it kill that was keeping something else in check?
Yeah. We have to think of this like I think we come at it in the Western world of like this treats this. Like this is treating, right? Like, oh, if I take, for example, vitamin C and then I start feeling better, it's quote unquote treating it. But we have to actually look at it from the opposite side, which is my body is supposed to have the vitamin C. It was deficient in the vitamin C. And taking the vitamin C wasn't treating anything. It was correcting a deficiency. And then the lack of the deficiency is why I start feeling better. So we have to look at it like we're not treating the sugar problem, or we're not treating the heart problem, or we're not treating the immune system with it. Our body's lacking it. We're supposed to have an incredibly diverse microbiome, and we are missing this. And so we're correcting the imbalance. And that's that when you look at it from that standpoint, it's like health is when we're not missing all the things we're missing. You know what I mean? It's like it's not about pouring a bunch of potions and pills into you. It's about helping give you what you have been missing because of the farming practices, right? Because of the what your grandparents and your parents didn't know when they took antibiotics, what your doctor and your family doctor didn't understand. And also glyphosate, many people may not still know this. It was originally designed as an antibiotic, right? It wipes out. It has many functions. It had many functions in the farming world, but it does completely destroy a healthy microbiome. It was also
Microbiome, yeah.
designed as a chelator, which is super interesting. I have had an interview about that where it also binds to heavy metals and then will release the heavy metals when pH changes. And in the body, pH changes when fluids cross over into different areas. So, for example, blood becomes urine in the kidneys, or in the brain, right? We've got blood becomes cerebrospinal fluid, or blood becoming lymph. So there's specific areas where when a fluid shifts over and the pH changes, the glyphosate will release the heavy metals that it's holding. And it was causing, in Sri Lanka, they banned glyphosate because it was destroying the kidneys of the farmers because it was binding to, I think it was arsenic, or it was binding to something in the paddy fields. And then it was attacking the kidneys basically because that's where the pH shift would happen. So glyphosate being in all our foods, unless you are, and you have to be super careful, eat organic, but even still, there's just a lot of cross-contamination with glyphosate. So glyphosate's out there, and it's especially, like you said, if you eat out, you're eating glyphosate. You got to be careful with that. Even if you also in farming areas. So one of one of my doctors, amazing naturopath. She was the dean of Bastyr Naturopathic Clinic. She said, here's a map of the farmlands in Washington, and you could superimpose it over a map of chronic disease and like Parkinson's, for example, and see that there are also stillbirths, and like just looking through this whole list, and you could see that there's just the red zone of where they spray, or like golf courses. You may have heard this one. Parkinson's is significantly increased rates of Parkinson's if you live within a mile of a golf course. Whatever they're spraying on golf courses and on farmlands, they call it conventionally grown, which I think is such a slap in the face term when we think about food, because conventional is actually organic. It was conventional for thousands of years. We've conventionally grown food organically, but their marketing, they're like, well, quote unquote conventional food is what they're spraying heavily, and then you have to pay extra to buy organic, so you have to pay extra to not be poisoned or be poisoned less. And all these regions, these farmlands, she's like, you don't want to live in this area. You don't want to live in the Yakima Valley or whatever, because the spraying there, you're getting it in your air, and you're getting it in your food, you're getting it in your soil and your water table. It's really hard to avoid. So I'm really fascinated that one of your strains helps the body rid itself of glyphosate. That's just blows my mind.
Well, that was one of my, back to my husband eating the soy protein shakes every day.
Mm-hmm.
I got very focused on glyphosate from the beginning and trying to understand and figure out there's got to be a way to solve this problem. And then, the microbiome came along, and you can also see the microbiome is a place. So this is another area that people don't realize with glyphosate. There are 3 amino acids that we don't make, we get from our food, or the microbiome makes them. And that's tryptophan, phenylalanine, and tyrosine. And that's made in the pathway that is targeted by glyphosate. So, not only is it doing all of this damage with, binding up minerals and, the list is long, but, it's disrupting those important amino acids. And in the plants, that's where the polyphenols are made. So it's in the rain, it's everywhere now. But in the process of thinking about our human probiotics, my chief scientific officer, Dr. Raul Cano, had been a pioneer in using microbes to clean up oil spills. And so we came up with a formula to clean up the soil of glyphosate and atrazine and hydrocarbons. And that's another team of microbes together that can do that, increase plant yields, increase the nutritional content of the plant tissue, again, because you're releasing those minerals that have been bound by the glyphosate. And that is in a company now that Raul runs called Ancient Organics Bioscience. And it has 7 years of data in 20 different crops showing that it improves the soil vitality, respiration, removes the glyphosate, increases plant yield. And so I'm very hopeful about the future because I know what microbes can do. And that's sort of what our mission on the human side is putting back these functional systems. And then I know on the other side, I'm a partner in that little company, and that we are doing the same thing on the soil side, because everything is connected, and we have to start with the soil and come all the way back to the human.
Oh, years ago, I took this training through the Institute for Integrative Nutrition, IAN, and one of the things I learned, which just blew my mind, they were like, okay, let's take the strawberry that grew in your backyard. Your backyard's organic. Let's say you've been remineralizing the soil with like mulch and, your own compost that's organic, and you maybe use some, you've got a horse manure or whatever, right? Like you just have this really rich soil, and this really healthy, diverse microbiome is in your garden. And you may not think about that because most gardeners didn't think about bacteria being good, right, in their garden.
Right. Right.
They're more like, well, my plants look healthy, right? So then you take the strawberry, and what's on the strawberry, which is again we don't think about because we can't see it, is this diverse microbiome that's specific to strawberry, and you eat it, and it's inoculating your gut. Well, if you leave the strawberry there in the garden, what happens? It starts to digest. And what we don't see, because we just see, oh, it's gone rotten, right?
Right.
And it starts to break down, and then it becomes soil, right? Or it becomes the food for things that are eating it, and then like worms or whatever, that becomes soil. But if we looked really close, we would see that it's actually that bacteria and all of the microbiome that's meant to be there breaks down vegetation, right? And that if you eat food that's fresh from a garden or from a farm that doesn't kill the microbiome of their soil, then you're getting, and so hopefully you're also eating some of it raw, like make a salad or something, but you're inoculating your own gut with that strain that is specific to those plants, specific to that. It could be that region, could have that soil, but you're bringing in that diversity that is meant to be there, and taking that understanding that what's the diversity that is supposed to be in your gut first needs to be in the soil. That your garden or your farm needs to have that diversity, and that we need to protect the microbiome of the soil so that we can protect the microbiome of our body.
It is all connected. It is absolutely connected. And what you're saying there actually made me think back to a test that I did a long time ago with, I think it was Viome, and they showed that I had 2 clover viruses, a red clover virus and a white clover virus, I think. And I was thinking back to, my childhood where I played outside in the grass, barefoot, rolling around in clover, because the grass, our yards were not these pristine, every
Mm-hmm.
blade of grass is the same. I mean, our yard had clover all over. And dandelions and things mixed in there, and I was rolling around in that, and I still had those signs of that in my gut microbiome.
That's
So
wild.
yeah, I loved that. I really loved that.
Did it have a negative impact on you?
No, I mean, no. And I mean, you can get a lot of those from teas and different things as well.
Oh,
And they, one of the, I don't remember who the researcher was, but where they were showing the healthiest microbiomes were the people who ate the largest variety of plants in a week. And people are like, well, how am I going to eat, 50 different plants in a week? Well, you can do that with tea. But you
oh,
also have to be mindful of the tea, that it hasn't been irradiated, because so
yeah.
much of the things in transport now have been irradiated. And I learned that too when I make homemade ginger ale, and you can't get the ginger to ferment if it's conventional ginger. It has to be organic ginger because it's
Oh
been
my
irradiated.
gosh.
Yeah.
Is this like a water kefir? Kefir?
I mean, you're basically just cutting up the ginger and putting um, sugar. You put sugar and ginger and distilled water in a glass jar and sit it on the counter for, till you start seeing the little bubbles form. And then it eats up all the sugar, and it's not very sweet, but it's a nice little fizzy ginger drink.
Oh my gosh, I love that. I'm totally trying that because I've made this water kefir. I never know if I'm saying the word right. Kefir, kefir.
I think either one is
Okay,
fine. Yeah,
good. I'm gonna get someone writing me, be like, "You're saying it wrong."
I know.
Um, I say like Sibo, and people are like, "It's Sibo." I'm like, "It's a made up word. We can say it how we want." So, but I've made this because I can't do it with, I didn't want to go down the route of trying to do it with coconut, but I did, because you think of kefir, you think of like dairy kefir, right? But you can do a water kefir, and it's so freaking delicious. It's really good, but it's needy. Like every 3 days, you have to feed it,
Yeah.
and it's like having a pet, right? But you have to like open the fridge and remember to feed it, and so it's fun for a while, but then it's just like
It's
if
work.
you yeah, it's work. You forget, and then all of a sudden I'll like have this because I just like don't drink enough of it. I have this like big supply of it, and there's a way to like make it hibernate or whatever. But yeah, I've had fun with those. But that's cool. I'm gonna try that. So take organic ginger and just crush it or slice it and
I usually
sugar
just
and water.
I just slice it. I
Hmm.
have grated it before, but I like it sliced better. It's also, if you want to strain the solids out of it, I don't, but I just let them sit at the bottom. Um, but I've even had one that I made and then I wasn't drinking it and I just stored it in my refrigerator and it got super clear. I mean, just clear, clear, clear. And then I took it out like 6 months later and just added a tablespoon of sugar and it just came back to life.
Wow, cool. I love that. I have fun experimenting with fermenting things, and I do love ginger. So I took my food processor, which has a it's not all food processors have this, but mine has a setting where you can adjust the thinness or thickness of the slice, and I made it be paper thin, the thinnest I could make it. And I put like a pound of ginger through my food processor, just paper thin slices, and I put it in a bowl. Um, and I put a few tablespoons of salt, and then no water, and just with my hands till they were cramping. Basically, I massaged it and crushed it with my hands, mixing it all in, and the juices started to come out. And then I
Hmm.
shoved it into a jar and poured the juices that came out on top, so that it is airtight, it's air sealed, and I fermented that for about a month, and it went so fast. Like I thought this would last me a year or something. It was just something I added to every meal. It was so delicious. So it's it's definitely spicy, but then the spice goes away because it's ginger. But it
Hmm.
was the most delicious. It's what you should have at a sushi restaurant. Like it was so good. And I think I might have published this on my website, but I made or I definitely published it in my book. I made a 3-day pico de gallo ferment, and
Mm.
it is out of this world. Um, because you don't want to ferment tomatoes longer than 3 days. But just think of cut up. Um, Take your onion and your garlic and put it aside, and take the lime and put it aside. Everything else you'd put in your pico de gallo. So I did fresh pineapple, and I did jalapeno and tomato, and then mix in again. Don't add water, obviously. Mix in salt. Put it in the jar and put it in somewhere where it's like not sunny and warm, right? For three
Hmm.
days, and then take it out, and then you mix in your garlic, because garlic and onion will sort of slow down the fermentation process. It takes
Hmm.
longer for that to ferment. And then I'd add the cilantro, the lime juice, because a lime again would slow down the ferment. And lime juice, onion, finely chopped onion and garlic, and mix it all together. And it is bursting with flavor in your mouth. It's so good. But this is like fermentation takes the flavor of your food to the next level. And that might be because your microbiome recognizes it and goes, "Yes, give me more of this. This is
Yes.
amazing. It's so good. This is so good." So playing with it is great. Um, when did you decide you wanted to sell probiotics as a product to help people? Like what? Because I know your initial goal was to help your husband, but did you have like this aha moment when you went, "Oh my gosh, this is really going to help people"?
Well, kind. I mean, I did when it helped John, but we had made 100 bottles of it, and we just kind of gave it out to people and said, "Let us know what you think." Not just people with Parkinson's, but anybody. And people started coming back to us and saying, "Oh my gosh, like this has changed my life." And I'm like, "Really? Okay."
Mm,
I was getting excited about it, and so then we just put it as sort of a sideline on our website. We were still primarily focused on collecting fecal samples and all the science we were doing. And it was just sort of this little weird button that, somebody would find, but we didn't advertise or do anything. And then when I brought Raul on, because of his background, I mean, he had such a deep background in understanding what microbes can do. And we were sitting in the lab one day and we were looking at the sugar shift formula that we'd put together. And actually, we had filed a patent for it. And we had built this computational model where we could figure out how microbes work together as a team. And so we were just sitting there thinking, okay, there's all these problems that people are having, and we can see all these things that are missing from the functionality of people's guts. Like, let's put our brains together and put together the teams that we think could do that. And so we came up with the idea, but we still, weren't totally behind switching the business entirely. And then COVID came along. And it's like, okay, it's probably not a really good idea for us to be collecting fecal samples with viable organisms in there. And so we used our economic injury disaster loan money to just kind of pivot the whole business, shut down the lab, stop collecting samples. So it was a huge upheaval in 2021 when we did that. And that's when we had also just started, we had met Dr. Davis, and we were working with him on looking at some different strains of Lactobacillus reuteri and trying to help him kind of figure out which ones he wanted to use. And so he found out what we were doing in terms of building teams, and he wrote about us in his book, Super Gut. And, I am forever grateful to him for doing that, because that's how people first learned about us. And
So
then,
cool.
People just started writing us and telling us what a difference it had made, whether it was, people who had constipation or our ideal immunity. I had this doctor in Hawaii who had severe chronic diarrhea for like 40 years, something one of his patients brought back. And it was the first time anything had worked for him. And so I was like, I mean, my whole reason for doing everything, whether it was collecting poop or, all the research and different things I've done, was to help people. And I was like, oh, we can really help people with this stuff. And so, then we were all in.
That's so cool. Just like, I love that you heard the stories, of it making a difference. What is in the sleep support, the better sleep, supports better sleep? What's in that supports better sleep? Like, why would someone have better sleep? It's like, what's the mechanism of action, right?
So the mechanism of action is bacteria producing tryptophan and melatonin. So most people don't realize, but bacteria also produce melatonin. And our tryptophan pathway has been disrupted by glyphosate. Yeah. So it also has that plantarum strain in there. It's helping address glyphosate. It does have a small amount of tryptophan in the formula, but that's more to feed the bacteria to kickstart them. And then they make bacterial melatonin and tryptophan for about 7 hours. And then they stop, and, it's time to get up.
It just occurred to me. I remember I believe it was Jeffrey Smith I had on the show, this was years ago, that he was quoting a study in Canada where they took pregnant, and I don't know why it was pregnant women, but they took pregnant women and they were testing their gut microbiome. And what they figured out was that the BT toxin that's in the BT corn, so this is genetically modified, right? They created a corn that would explode the guts of bugs.
Yes.
And you have to be like, and this is safe for us? Like, oh, if the bug eats it, they literally explode. but it's safe for us, so don't worry. So whatever it is in BT corn and the BT toxin that it creates, what he what he explained is that what they figured out was that the genetic material impregnated the gut microbiome, like you said earlier.
Mm-hmm.
You said we don't necessarily want to add something that's permanent, right? Because what the eating BT corn does is it changes the genetics of your own microbiome to continue to reproduce the BT toxin,
Yes.
and thus harming your gut. Then becomes a factory of antibiotics,
Yes.
constantly harming your microbiome long after you've eaten that corn. It's really like we have to be really careful when it comes to genetically modified food, because or like, think about in animal husbandry, quote unquote conventionally raised animals, like they're injecting them with all kinds of stuff, antibiotics
You
and
name it. Lots.
vaccines and
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so what we're eating, we have to be careful, because this genetically modified food is hijacking your own gut microbiome. So, like you said, we are not producing our tryptophan. We're not producing our melatonin. And yeah, there's other things that inhibit melatonin production. Before we hit record, we were talking
Light.
about
Yeah.
how light can cause it, like light pollution. That's just one thing. There's many things, but if you're so exhausted because you either can't fall asleep or can't stay asleep, or you're not having that deep restorative sleep, what's going on? What are you missing? What are you lacking? What's your body? I believe the body has a God-given innate ability to heal itself, and we really need to get out of our own way. And
Yes.
part of getting out of our own way is removing it constantly is trying to achieve homeostasis, is constantly trying to want to heal itself. So what can we give it that it's lacking? And so this is just so cool that there's a probiotic that can help the body to do what it's supposed to do.
Right. Well, um, I do have people who've shared their Oura Ring data where it's doubled their deep sleep over about a week's time. But back to your point about the genetic modification. So I also write a Substack called Martha's Quest, and 2 days ago I published a story called "The Enzymes We Tinkered With," and it's about a paper I read about 10 years ago, and I was doing a call with my customers this week, and it reminded me of that paper, and I pulled it up and started showing it to them, and I was like, "Oh, I see all these new things now that I didn't realize 10 years ago." And I wrote about all these marker genes that they engineered into the food, and if you look at them, they're connected to all the health problems that we have, whether it's people who have problems with folate, or
Mm-hmm.
um, the like I said, the aromatic amino acids, tyrosine, tryptophan, phenylalanine. So that's going to be all your neurotransmitters, and people who have problems with ammonia handling or detoxification or heavy metals tolerance, like all of that. If you look at this paper, it is just wild and crazy. And back then I was thinking, okay, these things can get into your gut microbiome. And I gave a talk at this Global Engage Microbiome Conference where I showed data looking at a handful of these genes in our microbiome data, and showing the presence or absence of these genes in people with Parkinson's versus the healthy controls, which was kind of interesting.
Have you have so what's the similarity? Like, I don't know if we can say healthy people, because I just feel like it's really rare to find someone that's truly healthy. But in the population that didn't have any diagnosis, that didn't have any symptoms, right? So let's say that's a healthy population. How much how many more strains did they have versus people that are unhealthy? Like, is it that obvious? Like, this.
It's not that obvious because I will tell you, it, I mean, it's been a while since I've looked at the data, but I want to say in the Parkinson's microbiome, there actually was more diversity. I want to say it was functional diversity, not necessarily strain diversity. I'd have to like dig back through the data, but when I thought about it that way, is like that is a microbiome that is trying to deal with a heavy toxic burden. Because you're trying to get microbes, or you're colonizing microbes that can deal with all these, whether it's microplastics or different antibiotics or chemicals. I mean, we're exposed to so many chemicals now.
Mm-hmm. So you've got these two books. I'm imagining your books are different.
They are very different. So my search for the perfect poop book is in a lot of ways very funny because it's funny poop related stories, and it goes back even to my childhood. So my mother she called it a spastic colon. Today it would probably be IBS or Crohn's. She went to a family wedding in Mexico, and returning from that trip, her gut was never the same, and she couldn't go anywhere. She had to know where the bathroom was to do. So I had this early experience of knowing what it was like for people who had gut problems. And so imagine all these years later that I ended up, collecting people's poop and getting into the gut business. But, I tell a lot of stories in there where people don't think about how it affects different people's lives. And then I have some information in there on the GLPs that people are crazy about now, and they cause severe constipation. And, there's a real big missing piece of the puzzle of what the long-term effects of that are going to be. But it's kind of a funny story way to learn about how important your poop is, and that you shouldn't be flushing it without looking, so you can understand. There was a European study that showed it was in the number 3 out of the top 150 categories that they looked at in this 2,500 people. Your bowel regularity and your Bristol stool score was the number 3 predictor of your health and longevity. So that's what that book's about. And then the other one is it's my love story of John, but it's also a very deep scientific exploration of the 24 years of trying to find the answers to John's Parkinson's, and ultimately losing him to a pulmonary embolism after long COVID and the vascular damage that was done by COVID.
Yeah. I interviewed a PhD cardiologist, research scientist, Dr. Fleming. This is back in 2020. He gave this really long lecture online, and I was so deeply fascinated. I had him on the show, but he was, would have, I think his license might have been under threat just because of what he was saying, which now everyone is like, oh yeah, he was totally right. But he was he's not a natural doctor. He's a traditional medical doctor, all about the drugs that we could give people, right? But he researched for 30 years the relationship between viruses and the microcirculation, and how we can see the damage that viruses have on our cardiovascular health at that tiny level, the smallest of levels. And he ended up creating a machine that is still used today that detects the earliest forms of heart disease because of
Is
the
that Hans
relationship.
Vink? Oh, no, you said it was Fleming.
His name's Dr. Fleming. I don't remember what the name of the machine is, but it was researching COVID was perfect for him because he had spent 30 years studying basically cardiology and viruses and their impact on our heart, not only heart health, but the entire cardiovascular system. And he ended up he was trying to find a, quote unquote, not a cure, but like a treatment for COVID. And he was not allowed to do the research in the United States because the government was trying to protect the emergency use authorization for the vaccine. And as long as you do not have a quote unquote treatment, then you can maintain the emergency use authorization. So the government was actively suppressing all doctors from finding a treatment, which is so ass backwards.
Yes.
It's just despicable. It's just the amount of people that died and that or suffered because of I think it's absolute negligence. But now we look back and all of a sudden it's like, no, I'm like, we need to still be angry about this. Like we need to like people need to hang in the streets, right? Like why are we, just moving on like nothing happened because it's going to happen again.
Well, I have a chapter in the book where I talk a little bit about, I don't go into huge detail about that, but I do talk about, so one of the things that made me better able to have discernment when all of that happened was because I had been collecting fecal samples and doing genetic sequencing. I had taken classes in genetic sequencing. I understood what PCR was, which is the test that they were doing for COVID. So I had this much deeper knowledge of all of that. And then I had very deep knowledge of the microbiome and, my kind of thoughts about like being a guinea pig. And so, I have a chapter in there specifically about how all the work that I did at the BioCollective kind of prepared me to have much greater discernment and ask questions that I found, many people that I thought were critical thinkers were not asking. And it kind of blew me away. But I also was like, okay, I'm not going to argue with people. If they ask for my opinion, I'll give them my opinion. And I'm not going to condemn them one way or the other, but I certainly don't expect to be condemned myself for choosing something different. And and we went through a process of doing a religious exemption for one of my children, and I talk about that as well, because it's like, okay, that process for me was very refining, and I think it was for her as well, because to do something like that, you must know in your own heart what you believe. And it's not about believing a religion of any kind or and you must know what the Constitution says. And when you look at the Constitution, it's not about one religion or another. It's about your firmly held belief and your ability to hold that firmly held belief and, the freedom of choice and what you believe. So I talk about that in the book as well, because I also say, that was kind of like a practice round. It's not going to, it's going to happen again. So use your head.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the chemicals in our air, water, and soil, they're not going away anytime soon because we still allow it by our choice, by how we shop.
Yes.
And if everyone today only bought organic, like let's say it's like, oh, but I really want the sour cream, but it's not organic. Like then you go without, or you find out how to make your own. But like if we were all serious about only buying and then not buying fast food, right? Figure out other ways, like other strategies around life so that we don't support the companies that support what's constantly being put into our environment that hurt us. So if enough people did that, because it's a free market, then those companies would have to change, right? Until we can get legislature to say, hey, you're not allowed to put poison in our food, figure out another way, which there are. It's proven, like organic farming, it's proven. We can do it. we can figure it out. but there has to be enough support for the farmer. And
Yes.
I actually just toured as part of there's a collective through the Washington University, the University of Western Washington or something. They have this collective where you can go on tours. It's mostly meant for farmers and farming students, and I'm in this cool homeschool group that was like, hey, this is a free field trip. So we drove out to Cleellum, which is like 2 hours away or something in farmland. And we were on a tour with a bunch of farmers who are wanting this. The whole point, they do about 100 tours a year throughout Washington for farmers and people who are just interested in it, who want to learn, teach them how to shift from a conventional to organic. And we got to pick the brain of a farmer who's been doing this for 20 years, organic farming, and he is passionate about teaching other farmers how to shift, how to be able to afford shifting. But what's really neat is that these universities have entire departments dedicated to helping farmers shift to organic. So there's like resources out there. There's but farmers feel the pressure because it's really hard to turn a profit. And how this farm does it is they sell mostly to farmers markets because that's how they can turn a profit and
Right.
stay organic. But if you can buy local, go to your farmers market or do those boxes right from local farmers. If you can get as much of your money towards that, first of all, you're eating healthier food, but you're also individually making a declaration that you are no longer going to be complicit in allowing this to continue. Right? If enough people do that, then we can change the system. We can because if we stop buying it, they're going to stop making it, right? So
Yes.
we can help change the system. So I'm a big believer in that. Put your money behind companies that you believe in. Now speaking of that, you have a 30-day money back guarantee, that's something I tell my listeners that I only ever support companies that stand behind their product to the point where they'll give you your money back for trying it. Because that just shows me that, first of all, you are way more likely to actually help give people results, because how can you stay in business and not give people results? But that's just really reassuring because like most people listening, I too have a graveyard of supplements collecting dust that was like got
I
halfway
do
through a
too.
bottle, didn't notice anything, kind of put it to the side. Like I have a graveyard. And I'm sure most people do in some cupboard or somewhere. And no one wants that. No one wants to spend money on a supplement and it just not work, because the point is what we're trying to do is get out of the body's way, trying to help the body get back to what it's meant to get back to. So I'm glad that you do that. I'm happy to put my money behind you, right? Your company that I put my money behind. And just remember, every single purchase you make, be proud of it. Don't go to McDonald's and then feel shame. Just don't do it. Like, figure out another way and be proud of every purchase you make, that it is going towards supporting what is supporting your health, but also the environment. Because our environment turns around and supports us, right? Like the current state of our environment is what's either harming us or helping us heal. You've talked a lot about the sugar support, but there's a word in there. It says support metabolism, and I'm really curious. How does it support? Like you've talked about in terms of sugar cravings, like it lowers sugar cravings. It's helping balance blood sugar, but are people losing weight on it?
We do have people who lose weight. I don't talk about that a lot because not everyone does lose weight on it. But I have had people who have written me that are like, "Oh my God, I lost." I had this one. I mean, this is a very unusual story, but I had a woman who was drinking 7 lattes a day, with the sugar and all the stuff in it. And she took the sugar shift challenge. We used to run this challenge. And within 2 weeks, she was down to half a latte and she had lost 15 pounds. Well, of course, you're going to lose 15 pounds if you stop drinking 7 lattes a day. But one of the things in the microbiome data, when we analyzed people who took it, we saw an increase in something called alpha ketoglutarate, which is in the TCA cycle, which is the cycle for making energy. So it's improving energy production in the microbiome. So, I think that is also one of the drivers of how it helps metabolism. In our clinical trial, we showed improvement in HOMA-IR, which is a measure of insulin sensitivity, and a reduction in insulin. And so all of those are big pieces of the puzzle in overall metabolic health.
Love it. It's so cool. Now you do have a button on your website that says find your probiotic as you go through a quiz. I'm like a sucker for quizzes. I always was when I was like a teenager, it's like, what's your flower, or what's your personality type, or what's your
Yeah.
are you a summer or a winter color? Like, I don't know. I just, any of those quizzes in like the magazines, not that I bought those often. I grew up more as a tomboy, but if there was a quiz in a magazine, I was such a sucker for it. I love taking quizzes. I don't know why. I just find it to be so much fun. So I love that you have this quiz. Because I'm looking at all these and I kind of want to take all of them. And I know I probably shouldn't take all of them at once, but I'm just thinking I want to get the total gut reset for my husband because he struggled with SIBO or SIBO for like so long. And he'll eat something that you would think is healthy, like a pineapple, and then he looks like he's like a 12 months pregnant. Like his gut just becomes completely round, like he's got a beach ball under his shirt. And I mean, and that's the overgrowth, right? He's producing a lot. One of my naturopaths say he's fermenting, not digesting.
Right.
And he's tried so many programs and none of it stuck, right? So it's like he gets some results for a while, but it didn't stick. So I'm really interested in doing the total gut reset for him. But is there something where you're like, start here?
Well, for people who've had, like what you're describing with your husband and long challenges, the total gut reset is a great place to start. Sugar shift, for someone who hasn't done a little bit of work on their gut before, then that is like I said before, it's a very low and slow. Like you need to start out very slowly with that. And that's why the total gut reset is a slower transition into sugar shift. But my personal kind of side favorite besides sugar shift is the one that we brought out last fall called Perfect Peace. And that is supporting your calming neurotransmitter production.
Oh my
And
gosh.
I like that because, I mean, we're all under so much stress. We're always under stress. And I have these days sometimes where I'm just in online meetings one after the other. And I can feel the tension rising in my body. And I will take one or two of those, and like 20 minutes later, it's like the edge has come off. And I'm like, I just don't feel the tension that was there. So that's kind of my new favorite. But I mean, I have had people who have ordered all of them and then they come back and say, oh, this isn't working. I'm like, well, okay, well, they're designed as systems. You shouldn't take all of them at the same time. But and that's part of why we put the quiz in there too, is because, it can be like, oh, look at all these shiny objects. I have every one of these problems, but you want to, you don't want to try to solve all your problems at once. And foundationally, solving your metabolic health, which is sugar shift, is our kind of hero that we have the most clinical evidence behind. We are getting ready to do that antibiotic antidote clinical trial, and then we have that new product that we're bringing on the market that will also have clinical trial data.
Yeah, I'm really excited about that. Perfect Peace, would that also be good for like kids with ADHD? Like, does it help increase GABA production? Like, does it help with focus?
It does. Now that you say that, it does help with focus, but it does help. It does help increase GABA production, so it would help with ADHD.
That
I
is so
think.
cool.
Yeah.
You briefly
You can make
mentioned
yogurt out of it too.
nice. Well, I'm doing that because my son actually
Yeah.
really likes the yogurt. Um, you had briefly mentioned autism, and I know that we're not treating. You're not like we have to be very careful when we talk
No.
about specific. Like you're not treating anything. You're supporting the body's ability to heal itself. You're supporting the structure and function of the body. Um, do you have any testimonials around people with autism?
So I have a I'm trying to think how old he is now. He might be 12 or 14. One of my longtime, I'll say, kind of a collaborator. He's over in Israel, but his youngest son has autism, and he started taking the sugar shift, and I think they're making yogurt out of it. And he has had some pretty significant improvement. And um, I have several emails from him. I do have recommendations or comments from other parents. I think one of the issues in autism is related to diet
Mm-hmm.
because these kids are very sensitive to sensation or sensations of food, and there's an attraction to carbohydrates,
Mm-hmm.
and in particular, things like pasta or bread, and all of those are going to be uh, they're going to have a lot more glyphosate in them. So I think just generally as a protective measure, the sugar shift, because it does break down the glyphosate, can be beneficial in that instance.
Mm-hmm.
But as I think I mentioned, there was overlap in the Parkinson's and the autism microbiome. And
Mm-hmm.
some of that is the gram negative bacteria that produce the inflammatory compounds,
Mm-hmm.
those are also elevated in autism and can be, I think there are some animal models using the lipopolysaccharide endotoxin in autism as well. So the fact that that sugar shift formula makes that shift over time in the gut microbiome away from those gram negative bacteria. It's just going to help a lot of things from an inflammation and likely help somewhat with behavior just because LPS is highly correlated with depression, and that's related to neurotransmission as well. So it's just
Love
kind of
it.
restoring your gut ecosystem by dealing with that glyphosate and getting rid of those endotoxin producers.
And then you've got one for the heart centered, and I see on your website it says supports CoQ10 and nitric oxide production, reduces inflammation. What's the mechanism of action there?
So bacteria actually produce CoQ10. I think most people don't realize that.
Mm-hmm.
Lactobacillus plantarum is one of the bigger CoQ10 producers. And then nitric oxide, I mean, there's a whole nother rabbit hole we could go down, but I won't go
Mm-hmm.
down. Related to so arginine, and arginine, you can take external arginine and increase nitric oxide production. It produces tyrosine. So it produces tyrosine and butyrate, CoQ10, and nitric oxide.
Some of these, like you said, take them for 1 to 2 months, but then I'm thinking like heart centered would be something that if I had concerns about heart health, is that something someone would want to take long term, or does it?
That is one that we sell more to practitioners who are dealing with people with cardiovascular issues. So we don't sell as much of that on the direct to consumer site, um, just because I think people don't think about it that way. But I do have more of the practitioners who use that with people, and they are using it more long term.
I,
And
I'd like
they used it with long COVID also.
I'd like to see like athletes do. where they do these, like they get on a treadmill, but they have like this machine hooked up to their breath, right? And then so they can measure their breath and they can measure their heart and their cardiac output. And I'd like to see like athletes who are at the peak of health, right?
That'd be a great idea. That's a great idea.
Like running on the treadmill, right? Or cycling or something, and then take the heart centered and then get it back on the treadmill, right? And just show like, is there a difference? Because if you're so everyone would benefit from reduced inflammation, increased CoQ10 and nitric oxide production, and healthy circulation, right? Everyone would benefit. But why are we waiting till we're super sick, right, to support what could be? And with my last interview, talking about how what we really need to do is support the cardiovascular health before it gets an insult, right? So that it can so it doesn't get an insult, so it gets less insults, and so it can recover better, and not have continuous insults from things that cause inflammation. So I'm just thinking about how it's like the heart-centered could be something that like you're taking preventively as a support for that. And this is something that it doesn't stay in the gut once you've I've taken it for 4 months, right? And then like 4 months later, I get my microbiome, my poop tested. It's not still there, or is it?
What I will say, of the ones where we have done the before and after microbiome test, you don't necessarily see the strains from the formula. But if you think about it again, they're producing things as they're going through the gut that are feeding and shifting the profile of the gut to a healthier profile.
Yes.
And so what you see coming out of the colon in a stool sample may not necessarily also be indicative, because like some of these work, like L. reuteri, you want that in your small intestine.
Yeah.
And so you're not necessarily going to see L. reuteri in a stool sample. You might, but you're probably not going to see it there, because where you want it, and Bill Davis talks about this a lot, you want it up in the small intestine, keeping the bad guys out.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. But it's neat because, people have said like, oh, don't take that. It just doesn't work because we don't see it in the stool months later, right? But you're like, well, that's not the point. The point is we're reshaping the entire gut to be a healthier, right? To be more robust, to be healthier. And plus people can see it in the results, right? They're gonna, they stop having diarrhea, right? They're gonna see that, right? Or they stop having the sugar. Yeah, exactly. They're gonna stop having the sugar cravings. Yeah, so they're gonna see it. That is so cool. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Love it. I see here on the website the sugar shift starter culture. I definitely want to play with that with my cashew yogurt that I make, and see how that goes. I'm definitely interested in getting the total gut reset for my husband. I'm really interested in getting some of this for my son, like the perfect piece, because I homeschool him, and he does have ADHD and he's not medicated. I am highly acutely aware of any change. So like if he eats something that isn't great for him, his focus, he can't even focus. He's fidgety, can't focus, and he complains about it. He's like, he wants to finish his math and he can't finish his math. And so it's like, wow, I can really see the impact of like a pro-inflammatory diet versus an anti-inflammatory diet in his focus. And then I'll add a certain one type of supplement or something, and I'll see a shift, right? So I can acutely aware. So I'm going to be putting him on Perfect Peas. We're going to see how it goes, but I'll be singing your praises to the rooftops if he can focus on his math work after taking it.
Well, I would love to hear from you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Let's have you back on the show when you've got more stuff coming out. You've got studies coming out. I'd love to have you back to share news when you have it.
I will come back and tell you about Ardizia, because I'm very excited about that. So.
I am too. It's been wonderful having you on the show, Martha. Is there anything you'd like to say to wrap up today's interview?
Well, I just want people to know that there's so much that they can do to support their body and its ability to heal naturally. And I think oftentimes, especially people who get a chronic diagnosis like Parkinson's, they're often told there's nothing they can do. And that's just not true. There is so much you can do. And I want people to be hopeful. And I think microbes are a big part of that if we start to really focus on the fact that we are more microbial than we are human and we care for that microbial part of ourselves.
Love it. Thank you so much. I can't wait to have you back on the show. I hope you enjoyed today's interview with Martha. Wasn't she amazing? I can't wait to have her back on the show. She's gifting listeners 15% off. Use coupon code LTH when you go to biotiquest.com/LTH. That's BIOTIQUEST.com/LTH, as in Learn True Health. And make sure you use coupon code LTH. I'd also want to make sure that you check out my anxiety course that I have just launched. I've been working on it for many months, and it's accumulation of my 20 years of experience helping people to end anxiety. So if you know anyone with anxiety, please share it with them. I give my first tool away for free. When you go to learntruehealth.com, click on the banner at the top that says "Got Anxiety," and then you fill out your name and email, and I give you my first tool, the one of 7 tools that I use with my clients to help them completely overcome and end anxiety for good. That one tool will teach you how to eliminate anxiety in the moment. And then the rest of the tools in the course teach you how to rewire the brain so it's no longer a problem in the first place. People that do this work with me. So by doing this course, people overcome health issues as well because they're lowering stress in the body. They're putting the body back into healing mode. And so digestion gets better. Mental clarity comes back. A feeling of purpose and being in control and being happy and fulfilled in your life comes back to you from participating in this course. So I highly recommend doing it. And also, one thing I am offering with this course is monthly Q&As with me. So as you go through the course, if you have questions or need support, you've got it. So check it out, learntruehealth.com. Click the banner in the top that says "Got Anxiety" and check it out. And make sure you share it with those you care about, because people who are suffering from anxiety do not want it anymore. And you just don't know what friend or family member has been crying themselves to sleep in their pillow, praying for an answer to these problems. And I know how that feels. And hopefully you are the one that shares with that person in your life and this has been the answer they've been praying for. So it's best to just, if you think of anyone you know that has anxiety, share it with them. They get this free tool from me. And whether or not they take the course, at least you've given them this free tool that helps them to turn off anxiety in the moment. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for being a listener, and thank you so much for sharing my podcast with those you care about. Have yourself a fantastic rest of your day.